In today's video, we continue on our NHL season preview series. Today, we look at the Boston Bruins as we make our way through the teams in the Atlantic Division. Can the Bruins continue to be a force in the top three? Will they take a step back? We'll explore all the changes and give our thoughts and opinions coming up next. Well, welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Today, we look at the Boston Bruins and preview their upcoming 24-25 NHL season. Of course, if you're new to this series, we're going to quickly recap what happened last year. We're going to look at the 23-24 campaign, take a look at some key team stats, top scorers, take a look at their cap situation, their playoff streaks, how the team has changed throughout the course of the offseason, take a look at the new roster, what we're looking at, and of course, any top questions facing this team, along with some projections on where I think they're going to finish this year. So let's first start by recapping what happened last year. It was another really solid NHL regular season campaign, 47, 20 and 15, 109 points. They finished second in the Atlantic Division. Of course, they ended up losing in round 2 of the playoffs after once again taking out the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 7 of Round 1. That's happened so many times. The Bruins seem to be the Leafs' kryptonite for some reason. But the Bruins in the last couple of years have had phenomenal regular seasons, but haven't made it super far in the playoffs. So obviously, all that regular season success is great, but if it's not followed up by a long playoff run, obviously it can still be a disappointing year. They scored 267 goals last year, which was 12th best. They gave up 224, which was 6th best. They had the 14th best power play with 22.2, which is very respectable. And the PK was very good as well, 82.5, which was the 7th best PK across the NHL. So let's now take a look at some of your top performing Bruins last year as far as points and offense goes. David Pastrnak led the way with 110 points, and then there's a significant gap between him and Captain Brad Marchand, who was the number 2 scorer on the team with 67 points. Obviously, Marchand, I think it's fair to say, might be slowing it down a little bit, and of course, this past offseason that's just coming to an end, he had 3 surgeries. And last year, I believe he had procedure as well. It's going to be interesting to see how Marchand does here the next couple of seasons. So obviously, like I said, big gap after Pastrnak, 67 points for Marchand. Charlie Coyle, 60 points, certainly exceeded expectations. Pavel Zacha with 59, and Charlie McAvoy in 5th with 47. The Boston Bruins have been a playoff team for the past 8 straight consecutive years. However, the last 2 out of the 3 years, they lost in round 1. So last year they lost in round 2. The previous 2 years to that, they lost in round 1. So they haven't really had a lot of playoff success the past few years, even though they've had really good, in the case to 2 years back, franchise record-setting regular season. So it's not all about what happens in the regular season, but you do need that success to even have a chance to do things that you like to do in the playoffs. Right now, from a cap perspective, they sit with $8.6 million in available space. That sounds phenomenal, doesn't it? Yes, but the big caveat here is, as I record this video, Jeremy Swayman unsigned, and we don't know what the exact dollar figure is going to end up being on a Swayman contract once the stalemate eventually comes to an end. But there was speculation at one point he wanted $10 million. There was some speculation that he wants something more comparable to Charlie McAvoy, which is around $9.5 million. Either way, he thinks, he knows he's one of the game's top goaltenders. He knows he's got, obviously, age and youth on his side still, and he wants to be paid accordingly. He doesn't seem like he's backing down on his contract demands. As I record this video, we're about 2 days away from training camps opening up, and there still seems to be a fairly big gap. Now, as Elliot Friedman likes to say, it's not done till it's done, and he also says everything can change with one phone call. So, all it takes is Swayman and his agent to say, you know what, we're going to drop our demands a little bit. We want to get a contract done. Make one call. Don Sweeney and Cam Neely be like, yep, that works. Bam, you get, it can come together quickly. So the fact that it's not done right now, is it concerning? Yes, it's very concerning. Jeremy Swayman is arguably the most important player on this team. And if he is not there to play games, that is a legitimate concern about how much success this team can have. Now, can this team get by with another goaltender? On a short-term basis, I think they can. They do have a really good team on the ice in front of the goalies, so I think that does help. But the fact that he's unsigned is very much a legitimate big concern. Now let's take a look at how this team has changed throughout the offseason. Let's start first with players that are new to the Bruins this year. Their two major acquisitions came in free agency by signing Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, who were both finished the year with the Vancouver Canucks. Of course, they were both Calgary Flames before that. The Canucks had acquired both players in separate deals with the Flames earlier before the trade deadline. Elias Lindholm comes over, having been linked to the Bruins for a couple of years now, as one of the better, I wouldn't say he's the best because he's not, but he's definitely, I'd say he's top 5 to 7 for sure, two-way centerman in the NHL. And in all honesty, I've said it before on this channel numerous times when discussing the Bruins, out of all the players that they could have targeted to try to replace Patrice Bergeron, and to make it clear, I don't think you can replace Patrice Bergeron. He is such a unique talent that was just so good at what he did. I just don't think it's possible to replace him. But amongst all the players in the NHL that had a chance to be available to the Bruins, I think Lindholm is one of the best, if not the best fits. And I've said that for like a year now. So in all honesty, I think they made a really good move. Now, the way he played in Vancouver, you could maybe argue there's a bit of an overpayment here. But based on how he's played before, in Calgary especially, in a solid top line or top 6 consistent role, he likely will earn his pay. So at the end of the day, I think that's a good signing. Nikita Zadorov comes over as a big defenseman. Obviously has size, lots of personality, and certainly adds a whole new dimension back there on the Bruins' back end. They also added Max Jones, who comes over from the Ducks. And of course, in the trade with the Ottawa Senators, they picked up Mark Kastelik and Jonas Korpisalo. Korpisalo comes with a little bit of retained salary, thankfully, but at the end of the day, he's coming off a terrible, terrible season in Ottawa. And really, if you look at his track record, the year before that when he was a UFA, he finished out in LA, and he had a strong finish, which is kind of what got him that contract. But really, even his time in Columbus, he's never really put up elite numbers. So, he's obviously going to be a big player that's followed closely by the Bruins and will play a large role in their success or lack thereof, depending on how much he's called upon. On top of that, they also have Vinny Lettieri, and they have Tyler Johnson in camp on a PTO. So we'll see if they can figure out a way to bring in Johnson on the contract or how things go. Now, of course, lots of changes going out the door, though. With the changes that are coming in, I like Zadorov and Lindholm. Kastelik, Jones, they're not bad players. And I think they could help the bottom 6, but they also lost a lot. Like Linus Ullmark is the biggest subtraction on this team. Of course, like I said, he was traded to Ottawa trying to free up some cap space. They knew they had to extend Swayman this year, which is not done yet, of course. And they could not afford to keep both guys. Ullmark, of course, closer to the end of his contract. Obviously, a little bit older. Just didn't make sense to go the other direction. So Ullmark is gone. Jake DeBrusk exits as a UFA after a lot of rumors surrounding him the past couple of years of, at times at least not wanting to be there. James Van Riemsdyk, who signed last year's UFA on a one-year deal, was not returned. Danton Heinen, he left. Heinen and DeBrusk both ended up in Vancouver, of course. A couple guys come from Vancouver. It's kind of weird how those things tend to always work out. Shattenkirk is not brought back. Boakfist, Grzelcyk, Lauko, Forbort, and Maroon. So there's lots of players there that are not returning to the Bruins. So a bunch of, bottom 6, middle 6, some blue liners. There's a really, of course, one of their starting goalies. So a bit of everything, really. The main rookie that I would look for in the Bruins organization to have a chance to play games and to have an impact would be Matt Poitras. Of course, he had a good look last year and had a decent little run. Ended up going to the World Juniors and then had an injury afterwards, if I'm not mistaken. So, but he's one of the main players in the organization that I think could see games as a youngster. Maybe Fabian Lysell, that would be a bonus for them if he can get into more games this year as well. As far as guys that could get contract extensions this year that will be eligible, pending UFAs include Captain Brad Marchand, Trent Frederick, Vinny Lettieri's on a one-year deal, Patrick Brown, and Justin Brazeau. On the RFA side of it, less urgency because they're restricted, but Morgan Geekie, Johnny Beecher, Mark Kastelik, and defenseman Mason Lohrei. So amongst those players, Brad Marchand himself has said that he's not too worried about the contract. He's just focused on getting ready for the season. I think after having 3 surgeries this offseason, and like I said, his point totals were down a bit last year. He's been through a lot of injuries the past couple of years. He had a major shoulder surgery not long ago. I think he really just kind of wants to see how he feels and doesn't want to rush this. And I think it's for the Bruins, it's probably a good bet to do the same thing as well. But obviously, I would suspect if everything's looking good for him health-wise, and I assume there's interest from both parties to extend his time in Boston a bit. I mean, he's getting to his later 30s, but I would think Marchand wants to continue playing a little bit at least. Wouldn't be surprising if he extends 1 or 2 years, but that's certainly some news to look forward to throughout this year. Amongst all the other guys that are pending UFAs, it's hard to say. I don't know that any of them are going to be quick signings that we see early in the year, but once we're past the halfway point, I could see if things are going well, either guys like Frederic or Brazeau getting extended. Mason Lohrei is going to be an important piece of the team moving forward, so I would suspect they don't want to let that go too long, but at the same time, it's not urgent because he's RFA. So we'll see. What's the roster looking like going into the season? Well, between the pipes, like I said, you should have, hopefully, Jeremy Swayman, and then Jonas Korpisalo. On the back end, you've got Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm, Brandon Carlo, and Nikita Zadorov will make up your top 4. And then you got Andrew Peeke and Mason Lohrei as your third 5-6 defenseman. So ultimately, that's a pretty good blue line. You've got some size, you got some snarl, you got some good skaters, smart guys that can move the puck and produce offensively. In all honesty, I really like the Bruins blue line. I think it's pretty solid. Up front, of course, you're led by David Pastrnak. Outside of Pastrnak, you're looking at, obviously Elias Lindholm likely will be your number 1 center this year. I would think Charlie Coyle can kind of slide back a bit, which is better suited for him. I don't know if they'll go with Zacha as 2 and Coyle as 3, but Zacha played a lot of center last year as well. That to me, I think would be a good way to set up your lines. And I think when Coyle was the 3C, like he was, really slotted well. But obviously he proved last year that he can produce a little bit more when given more opportunity too. So I'm not sure exactly how they're going to do those lines. But Lindholm for sure is right up there. Lindholm, Pastrnak, Marchand, Coyle. You got Zacha, you get Geekie, Trent Frederic, Martin Jones. Mark Haslick will have a shot at being your 4th line center, or he could also play wing on your 4th line. Justin Brazeau, likely a 3rd liner. Johnny Beecher, Vinny Lettieri. And then you got guys like Poitras, Brown, maybe Tyler Johnson, kind of, fighting for some ice time and opportunities there as well. So all in all, I think they still have a pretty decent top 6. Obviously last year they scored better than the average, but they weren't, knocking it out of the park type of deal. With what they have compared to last year, I would suspect that they may not be as offensive. Like they may struggle to score a little bit more than they did last year. If you look at what we have in the mix there for the Bruins, Lindholm, he can produce, but you take away, DeBrusk and JVR and Heinen and some of these guys, like I don't think it's going to be drastically different, but I could see the fact that their goals for might be down a little bit. But I think, and that could be problematic because, theoretically, they get Swayman signed, the goals against and the goaltending and everything should be hopefully pretty close to being as good. But Swayman will be the big factor here. The thing that I think the Bruins are uneasy with right now and why this deal's not done is Jeremy Swayman is definitely an excellent goaltender. Nobody's disputing that. They gave him the ball in the playoffs last year, and he went pretty far with it, and it certainly was not the reason they lost. But he also has not played like a full campaign being the guy without having Allmark behind him so that they were splitting the duties. Like, can he play, 60, 65 games and have the same results at a higher game total? That's, I think, the concern. Can he play the bigger workload and stay healthy? That's obviously a concern. If Swayman misses time in the beginning and they have to rely on Korpisalo, that could be very problematic. Now, I do think Korpisalo likely will do better in Boston than he did in Ottawa, regardless. I mean, obviously, everybody knows I follow the Senators very closely, and I've seen Korpisalo play pretty well every game last year. And there was a lot of those goals that were his fault. There's no doubt about it. Were there times when the goalies were hung out to dry? Yes, they were. But it certainly was not all on the D. Especially in the second half of the year, there would be times when Jonas Korpisalo would make an amazing 10-bell save followed up by giving up the softest goal you've ever seen. It was like the tale of two different goalies at times. And he would give up, and Forsberg was guilty of it too. The first 2 shots of the game went in. Like, I can't remember what the number was, but it was a really high percentage of the time. And all the analytics suggest that if the Ottawa Senators could have received league average goaltending last year, just average, that they would have been a playoff team for sure. They would have been one of the wildcard teams. They could have at least beat out Washington and squeaked in there. That's how much of an impact it had on them. Now, with the Bruins being better suited defensively and the whole structure that they have, obviously I expect the Senators to be better this year, but it doesn't matter because Korpisalo is not part of that anymore. With the Bruins, they've had good structure for a long time. They're a strong defensive team. So I think the odds of him getting at least some better results, they may not be like drastically better, but will they be better? In theory, it should be no problem. But can he play to Swayman's capability or Ullmark's capability? I really have my doubts. So, we'll really get to see just how good Boston is, because there were times when you kind of wondered if Swayman and Ullmark covered up a lot of mistakes, and you take away that strong goaltending back there, were they really as good as the numbers showed? There's some that were convinced that the Bruins were not as good and that their goaltending really covered up a lot of flaws. And, well, time will tell here, because Ullmark is not there and Swayman is not to be signed. Now, there's still time for Swayman to get signed and not miss time. But time is ticking. Very much so. And at this rate, if he gets anything close to what he's asking for, they're going to have to make another move to free up a little bit more space. So how do they do that? That's going to be the question. So it's kind of tough to say how this is going to go. I do think the Boston Bruins have the potential to once again be a top 3 team in the Atlantic Division. I kind of think I have them penciled in kind of being around the number 3 spots, what I think. I'm predicting that Toronto and Florida will be a little bit stronger. So I think that the Bruins are more likely a 3 seed, but maybe a 3-4. It's hard to say. In all honesty, I'm still kind of analyzing the Lightning. I'm not sure exactly where I see them fitting in just yet. And I think out of all, are Detroit, Ottawa, Buffalo, how much are they going to push to move up? It's going to be interesting this year if we see a shift or not. But I do think with the moves that the Bruins made, they're still a very good team. And I still think that they can be a top 3. But I do think there are just a couple of things going wrong from slipping down. So, let's say that the Swayman extension drags on and he misses time. And if Marchand is, I'm worried about Brad Marchand's ability after, 67 points last year, 3 more surgeries. What if he gets hurt again, or what if he's just really struggling? If his production continues to, go to the wrong way here, if those two things happen to combine, I do wonder about their overall success. But there's lots of goodness there to kind of make up for that. It just, sometimes you see things where everything goes right. Sometimes you see years where everything goes wrong. And sometimes you see a little bit of everything and it just kind of goes in the mushy middle. And that's what I'm afraid of for the Bruins, is that mushy middle, because they could get caught up in a race with teams like Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo, and, maybe not come out the other side. But they made some good additions. It's not even the additions I'm really concerned about. I think on paper they look pretty good. I honestly just feel like it's the Swayman situation and how productive can Marchand still be. Those are my 2 X factors. And if those things go well, they'll be a top 3 team. If they don't go well, then it could slip. But overall, I think they always seem to come through. I learned a long time ago, it's really tough for me to bet against the Boston Bruins because they just always seem to make it happen. So let me know what you think about the Boston Bruins' upcoming 24-25 season. Are they going to continue to be a top 3 team in this Atlantic Division? How will the Swayman contract situation resolve itself, and what will the end result be? Will they get a long-term deal done at big money? Will they end up having to do a short-term bridge? Could they walk them to early free agency? Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.